More Perfect Union, a podcast about the joy we get from American politics, or as we like to say, real debate without the hate. On this special episode of A More Perfect Union, we look at religion and its role in the 2016 presidential election, as our co-host, Greg Matusak, has a fascinating conversation with Pastor Lauren Halad, a Lutheran pastor and a city councilman from Cincinnati, discussing how the Trump-Clinton race is being received in his church and his community.
I have with me today Lauren Halad. Lauren's a very interesting person, and he's a great guest for the More Perfect Union because he is not only an Iraq veteran, he's a Lutheran pastor and a city councilman for the village of Marymount in northern Cincinnati. In addition to all of that, Lauren has his own podcast, a great podcast I recommend everyone checking out. It's called To Hell with a Hot Dish. How would you describe that podcast?
Yeah, To Hell with the Hot Dish is the work of myself and two other pastors. We're across the country. One is in Texas, one is in North Dakota. I'm here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And our podcast is all about challenging the cliche culture we find within Christianity today. So we're three pastors who use a lot of humor, who talk about things happening within our culture, like the recent protests with football players and the Dakota Access Pipeline, to discussing matters of our faith, to even talking about this election. We actually had Greg on our podcast recently to talk about, what is it like doing ministry in an election year. So great time, a lot of humor, a lot of banter. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been listening to your podcast, To Hell with a Hot Dish, for a little while. It really is a great podcast. Question I'm going to ask you, is this year, political year, any different? Do you see it more divisive than any other years past?
Oh, totally. I think this is an extremely polarized and divisive year, although I honestly feel in the last couple of weeks that sort of waned a little bit. I think that even a month ago we were in a more divisive culture than we are right now, partly due to the fact that I think more and more and more people are seeing the faults, failures, and just quite frankly the absurdity of the Trump campaign.
Really?
right now. It seems like, a week away from election, or a couple weeks away from election.
Yeah, we're 12 days right now.
He is kind of slipping, his campaign's sort of slipping into this abyss right now. Or maybe people are just worn out and they're a little tired of the whole cycle. And so, but I definitely think this year has been a divisive year, a polarized year, a year just in general where people are on edge. People are used to this national argument and this national fight that's been happening that we've all been privy to, and that can't help but create an unsettling culture.
Do you see it in your own congregation?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that all people are wrestling with these matters, with this election, and I think it's always a challenge to do ministry in an election year. There are certain challenges that present itself that aren't always easy.
Both campaigns always take the moral high ground, whether you're, and that's putting it lightly. And both campaigns often, like to cite scripture. How do you take it when you do a sermon?
Right.
And someone will, and whether it's meant to be political or not, someone will misinterpret and then take it politically.
Right.
And use it for their own, he meant this. And obviously now I'm going to, go vote one way or vote another.
Well, I think a lot of pastors get this wrong. I think a lot of ministers out there today, religious personnel, clergy, I think that they have allowed the political landscape to sort of cloud their messaging. And if you're not careful, we're all tempted to do that. We're all highly convicted people. Religious personnel are some of the most highly convicted people that I know. But the challenge for me is to preach a message or teach a class from the principles and foundations of the faith. And so when I preach a sermon, I am working really hard on proclaiming a word that is influenced and comes from my faith. Now, what often happens is people hear that message not through a lens of their faith first, but through a political lens, especially in a season like we're in right now. And so when I preach a message on, say, loving your stranger, loving a stranger, loving your neighbor, a lot of people will say, "Oh, here he goes again, this political message," because a lot of what I'm saying has correlations to the political landscape, to the different parties and their platforms, but people don't hear it that way first. And so the challenge is to proclaim God's word, to proclaim the message from the place of our faith that influences how we think about life and politics and culture, not a political message that then should influence your faith. And I think that's what you see a lot of in the religious community today, are people that are taking political, cultural messages that they're actually lifting those up and saying your faith should be influenced on this political platform, as opposed to your politics should be informed from your faith platform. And those lines intersect, they cross over, and it is often not an easy thing to do. So I'm always careful with how my sermon is not just being proclaimed, but how it's being heard by people, and everyone's going to hear it differently.
Have you ever had to correct someone, or is that like it's up to people to interpret, or do you say no, that wasn't political? That really was about,
Well, it's usually pretty easy to tell how someone hears something, and I know I like to keep people guessing as to my political beliefs, my political leanings. I don't think most members of my congregation have me pinpointed for where I am, probably because I'm somewhere in the middle of all of this. I'm sort of a moderate person to begin with, but it's difficult. It's difficult to do ministry to, as I like to say, red pews and blue pews. We have them both. And my job is to lead people in the faith that are sitting in both of those pews. And how do you do that together?
And for the record, the village, when you run for the city council for the village of Marymount, you run nonpartisan.
Well, some folks do run partisan in Marymount, for village council, but it's often not necessary. It's not needed. We're a small village.
Right.
And, just right around 3,000 residents live in Marymount. Charming, quaint, upscale community.
Upscale, very upscale.
Yeah, it's a little It's a little bit of Pleasantville, USA, but it's charming and wonderful. I love the village. But partisan politics aren't really a central part of that. It's more based on your principles of governance. Do we believe in small government? Do we believe in large government? Do we believe how do you govern? And it's small town things. We're talking about stop signs and things like that. We're not talking big legislation.
With that in mind, as the election's drawing nearer, do you see? You said earlier it's getting better. Is it because of the weariness? We're just done with it, or do you think there's a finality to it?
I think there's a finality to it. I think that I think in this isn't necessarily I think we've seen in the polls lately Hillary and her campaign sort of take a little bit of a lead over Trump. Correct, you're the expert, so correct me if I'm wrong, but she's ahead in a lot of the national polls right now.
Yeah,
I think that part of that,
8%.
I think part of that is settling in with a lot of people in my community, and I think maybe just in general the polarization, we feel it the most when things are truly neck and neck. So I don't know if people are just getting tired or they're wearing out. We've tried really hard here to have dialogue. That's one thing I really appreciate about your podcast, is that I love your tagline, real debate without the hate. I think that's extremely difficult, especially in the church. The church is the most, it can be one of the most divisive places on the planet because people are highly convicted. So we actually ran a class this fall called How Do We Live and Love Like Jesus in an Election Year? And we have had forums on gun control. We have one coming up on immigration. So we're talking about this again now through the faith lens. How might they influence our political beliefs? We're not trying to endorse candidates or platforms. We're trying to have real dialogue about how does our faith intersect with political realities, which, quite frankly, aren't even political realities, they're human realities. These are human issues that we have politics that try to address. Well, faith is another reality that tries to address human issues. So can we see that we're actually all in this dialogue, we're all in this dance together? And often we don't think that way. We think this is politics, that's religion, this is society. Well, quite frankly, it's all about our shared humanity and the reality that we all have to inhabit this planet and inhabit this country together. And we have a hard time sorting that out. And so we want to categorize everything. I love listening to your podcast because you have the moderates and the conservatives and the liberals and the neoliberal libertarians, whatever that is. You have every.
I'm still trying to figure that one out myself.
And I'm poking fun because I think that we need a third way. But I think we all try to categorize ourselves into these camps, which just happens. It's human nature. But we also have a lot of work to do to say, what does it mean to share this planet together? How are we called to live? How are we called to thrive in this country? We all want the same things. We might want different ways of getting there, but all people want to be happy and have an abundant life and feel as though they're making a difference in the world. We just have different ways of approaching it. But I think when you really enter into dialogue, which is what we're trying to have our people do here, you realize that we have much more work that we share together. And so hopefully some of those walls can fall down. And when the church is one of the most divisive places, in culture, I'm heartbroken because I think if any place in the world, it should be the place where we can gather with different convictions, different ideas, different thoughts, and come together and yet still have a semblance of our unity, because our unity is not in our agreement.
Do you think after the election, will we be able to come together, or will you think as a country or even as churches or as faith, we will be too broken?
That's a huge question. And I think it's a question a lot of people are asking right now. We can allow as people, as citizens of this country, I think we can allow our differences and our disagreements to divide us if we allow them to. Or we can choose not to stare at the sun, we can choose not to stare in this burning ball of fire that wants to separate us. We can choose to rally around a common cause, a common ideal, a common vision. And I think that's what so often gets lost in America today and in American politics, is that we have lost the sense that we are rallying around the American ideal, the American vision of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, where people can raise their families, live their lives, be productive, give back to society, and that there's room for everyone to do that. I think we've lost that vision. And so politics today has become so issue-based instead of being about principles of governance. And I think that's one of the realities we're seeing in this election cycle more than any other. Politics used to be about big government versus small government, rules of governance, principles of governance, and now we're talking about specific issues that matter, but I haven't heard any talk on principles of governance. And so we need to, one, get back to that, and two, get back to what ideals and what vision is guiding our country. If we can find a way to do that as citizens of America, as fellow humans in this country, then I think there's hope. My job is to maybe come on and say there is hope. I
think you get paid for that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Maybe not enough, but I think you get paid for that.
Yeah, so I think people can come together. I think they can rally together. But I think there are a lot of things working against that in today's culture. I think people need real face-to-face dialogue, and people need to sit across from people that think differently, and they need to shut up and listen. And that's not easy to come by today. We all want to be heard. We don't always want to hear. And I think the way forward is relationship. It's always relationship. So it doesn't help to shoot arrows across the camp at one another. It does help to sit by the fire together and tell stories.
Nice.
And
Lauren Halad, veteran of Iraq, Luther pastor, and city councilman of the village of Marymount, and excellent podcaster from To Hell with a Hot Dish. You've been wonderful to sit down with on the More Perfect Union podcast. Thank you very much for coming and talking to me today.
Hey, thank you guys, and great work. Keep up the great work. Love listening. Have recommended it to a ton of our listeners at our podcast. So thanks for what you guys are doing.
All right, thank you.
Since we're on the topic of religion, we're going to go back to a conversation that the gang had a few weeks ago that didn't make our air show because it got a little bit more testy than we like to get. But we're bringing it back tonight because it's on the topic of religion in the 2016 election. And specifically, it talks about an email that was purportedly in the WikiLeaks emails where a Clinton staffer talked about Catholicism. And the references that she made bothered a lot of people on the right, and it apparently bothered somebody on the show too. So let's go back to that conversation now and see how it played out. So we've talked a lot about Donald Trump and how several of us here do not think he has a very good chance of winning the presidency. But there's another candidate running, and she's got some problems of her own. Hillary Clinton this week is being besieged by the WikiLeaks email dumps. And I wanted to ask everybody, and specifically Emily and DJ, if you think there's anything powerful enough in what you've heard or read so far in the emails and in the speeches that have been released that you think it's going to inhibit her success in the coming weeks.
You know what, honestly, I don't think that. I think people are so tone deaf now to the emails. I think there could be things inside of this that would have done damage at an earlier date if there would have been some more, sensational media presence behind it. But honestly, we're so close to the end here. I don't think people are listening. I think they've gone tone deaf to anything that involved emails.
I would say the stuff that was in there about Catholics might affect some Catholic voters, probably not a whole lot. The stuff about evangelical voters, that might, a lot of evangelical voters, particularly evangelical women, probably fell off of the Trump train after the events of the last week. That might make it harder for them to go over to Clinton. Again, they might go to Johnson or McMullen. In terms of game-changing stuff that threatens her position as the front runner, I didn't really see anything there. The essentially Trump himself basically blew that up by repeating the Russian malinterpretation of one of those emails, which gave the Newsweek reporter the chance to say, "Hey, everybody, I'm not Sidney Blumenthal." For the most part, I don't really think that has much of an impact because one, most people when they see that they think, okay, the first thing they probably think is, okay, what emails have I sent that I wouldn't want anybody to leak to the public? And number two, the fact that the Russians are already propagandizing some of the stuff, and again, getting it wrong deliberately, is diluting whatever impact this may have had. I think at the end of the day, it will be, and it already has been, a tempest in a teapot.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, I've read. Obviously, I haven't read through the emails. There's too many, but I read the articles that suggest, hey, we found something in here that's really embarrassing to the Clinton campaign. And at every turn, it's something that, frankly, is just a phrase, somebody saying something that if you look at it, just that phrase out of context, you can project meaning onto it that might look negative. But most of it is very benign. And, you have to wonder, if we had an inside look at the emails of Roger Stone, Corey Lewandowski, Steve Bannon, David Bossie, Kellyanne Conway, going back 2, 3, 4 years. Of course, they weren't associated with Trump then. But if we had that kind of, detailed data on the Republicans, just imagine what we would find in their emails. So it's very unfair to, look at...
Hang on, Kev.
It would probably mostly deal with clown snuff films and stuff like that.
Hang on. Let's be honest here, Kevin. Do we really think that the emails of the Trump campaign folks would really be anything worse than what Steve Bannon, who was his campaign manager, puts on Breitbart every single day?
No, of course not. That's my point.
That's the thing. That whatever stuff is in Trump's emails would be out there for everybody to see. I actually think the stuff that I saw on Catholics, frankly, did upset me and did offend me. But it didn't surprise me.
But that was a line from Jennifer Palmieri, written, I think, in 2013.
Hang on.
It's not Hillary Clinton.
Kev, The point I'm making was it does not surprise me that a lot of people in the Clinton campaign and a lot of people in the Democratic Party tend to look down on conservative Catholics. I knew that before I saw a single email. So, like I said, none of the stuff that was in the email so far really surprises anybody, and that's the thing. We all go through our outrage ritual, if you will, but nothing is really surprising.
But
A
wait a
lot of
second.
Democrats don't like conservative Catholics. And
Oh, no, stop it. One
Oh, come
woman
on,
wrote one email that
Kevin.
made one comment about Catholics, and
Kevin.
you're saying everybody knows that a lot of Democrats and a lot of people in the Clinton campaign don't like Catholics. That is a ridiculous.
Whoa.
That is a
Hold the phone here. Hold the phone here,
conclusion
Kevin.
to come
Okay,
to
okay,
based
okay.
on
Here,
one
Kevin.
person, one email.
Kevin, stop.
You
The
stop
hell was
because
that?
you are projecting
I
onto the
said
entire Democratic
I
Party
didn't-
an antipathy
I-
towards Catholics
No, I
based
did
on
not.
one line
No,
and one
I
email
did not.
written in 2013.
I did not say they don't like Catholics. I said they don't like conservative Catholics. That's not the same thing. You yourself should know that.
Let me clarify.
Hang on.
Let me
Greg, you can't.
because
Not
you're
yet.
digging
Not yet. I'm
yourself
still too
in
drunk.
a really big hole. You're digging yourself in a big hole.
No, I'm not.
And
because
you are because you're saying you're using generalizations. What I think you want to say is a lot of liberals don't like the concept or the ideas that conservative Catholics sometimes promote. It's not so much that they don't like them personally or they don't like them.
No.
But sometimes
What I read in those emails, particularly from Podesta, where he said,
Yeah.
"Oh yes, they call them they choose to be Catholic because their rich friends wouldn't accept them if they're evangelical." That is a slam against conservative Catholics. That is the very generalization that you don't like. That is what Podesta did when I think it was a Newsweek columnist who talked about the Hobby Lobby decision and the Sisters of the Poor petition against the Obamacare abortifacient mandate, and said, "Oh, the only reason that's being considered is because a majority of the court's members are Catholic." And she actually said that. There is a problem I want you to acknowledge. Okay, I will acknowledge it's not about all Catholics. It's not about all this. But I want you to at least acknowledge that there are a large number, not a majority, maybe not even a plurality, but there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party and on the political left in America who do not like the conservative Catholics in this country, and a number of them are very open about it. When a columnist from Newsweek says there is a problem that there are too many Catholics on the Supreme Court, then then the left has a problem with conservative Catholics. Period. That is straight out of the know nothingness of the 1850s.
I've been a Democrat for well over 3 decades now. Yeah, give or take. Yeah. And I have never heard a disparaging word like, Catholics or anything, even the word conservative Catholics at any of our secret meetings, at any of the walks, at any of the standing at the parades.
So are you telling me that you're okay with John Podesta basically saying the only reason these people are Catholics is because they won't want to be
happy with that. I'm not happy with that. But once again, I think that's wrong, and I think it's a terrible thing. But to say that liberals have a problem with Catholics, capital C, or conservative Catholics, I've never seen that, and I'm entrenched in this I'm enfibred. I'm entrenched in this community.
That's funny.
I'm fully fiber. I'm entrenched in this community. I've never seen it, and I go to church every week. I do. I've got a first communion coming up. I was married in Italy, for goodness sake.
Just to be clear, Gregory, no one is questioning your faith. I'm sorry if I came across that way.
No. But just to say, now maybe they see me coming a mile away and they say, there's that Catholic.
Look,
no, I don't think
before they tell them,
I don't think
they look around.
We're getting so far off the track
we
here.
are.
But let me pull.
But to get to the point again, I don't think any of this really surprised anyone, and I certainly don't think any of this is going to hurt the Clinton campaign.
But here's the problem, DJ. You're saying it as it's a fact, and I am questioning the fact. You're saying, oh, this is a fact, but I don't think anybody's surprised by it, and I am denying the fact. And let me pull the same card that Republicans always pull when we get to racial issues, and they say, well, we're the party of Lincoln. Don't forget that. Don't forget, the Democratic Party is the party of John F. Kennedy, the first Catholic president. So I am going to reject thoroughly this idea that there is an antipathy towards Catholics in the Democratic Party. And I agree with what Greg just said. I've been a Democrat for all of my 60 years, and I don't recall ever hearing another Democrat complain specifically about Catholics. There are issues that are conservative issues that are very important to Catholics, and we disagree with them on those issues. It is not about their religion. It is not about their upbringing or anything else like that.
I do not need to hear it from you. I certainly wouldn't expect to hear it from you, but I have actually seen it in black and white. I have seen it in columns. I have seen it from folks in media who have said there are too many Catholics on the Supreme Court.
That's like me saying I have seen racism in the Republican Party. So why don't we just call it a flip of the coin? You want to go look at Roger Stone's emails? You want to go look at Steve Bannon's emails and see how they talk about black people, how they talk about Jewish people, how they talk about Mexicans? Come on.
Kevin, I don't dispute any of that. It's half the reason I finally left the party. Because the Trump nomination made it very clear that was far bigger and far deeper than I thought it was. And I'm not necessarily saying it is rampant within the Democratic Party. That's not my point. What I am saying is that folks in, say, that like Bill O'Donnell of the Catholic League and folks like Cardinal Egan of New York, folks who are Catholics who are generally on the conservative side, we have been dealing with this for some 20, 30 years from the left, some of it outside the Democratic Party, some of it inside the Democratic Party. My point is, all I'm trying to get to is a tinge of anti-Catholicism, particularly aimed at conservative Catholics, is something the left has had for quite some time. I'm not going to say how pervasive it is because I'm not of the left.
Okay.
And I know you're laughing, but it is there. And if you will talk to conservative Catholics besides me, you will hear stories about it and you will know that it is there. All I'm saying is that it is there, and it is not a surprise that a couple of Clinton staffers were involved in it. Again, I don't think it's going to necessarily hurt Hillary Clinton at all. Because
but you know what, I will stipulate that to you if you will stipulate to me that that there is a significant segment of the Republican Party, maybe not a majority, maybe not a plurality, but a significant segment that are anti-black, anti-women, anti-gay, and anti-poor people. If you want to stipulate that, then I'll stipulate to you that there are Democrats who are anti-Catholic.
And for how long have I been calling the Republican Party the party of big government for white people?
And so with that...
Okay, well, on that happy note.
And on that happy note. So, please check out our website at moreperfectunionpodcast.com, where you can also find our blogs and bios. And don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes. And if you've enjoyed this fun little tea party that we've had here tonight and would like to discuss politics with us online, please join us in our online Facebook political group, Open Fire. We're all there. We'd love to see you there, too. So until next time, bye-bye.
So we're off air. I will tell you what I really think.